Right then, in this video we're going to be taking a look at my favourite building in Birmingham. This is the ICC, and this building is an absolute classic, and it was built in what I consider the golden age of buildings. Now when you ask most people, what is the golden era for buildings, which decade, a lot of people think of historic buildings like very old buildings, but often in more recent buildings people might think of 1900s, 1920s, which is Art Nouveau, or they might think of 1930s, which is Art Deco. But there's other eras of building which are often just overlooked and forgotten about and not recognised for truly what they are. One example of that is the 1960s Bruceless buildings, an era which I find very interesting, but most people think they look ugly. But in this video we're looking at a different era to that. We're going to be looking at what I consider is the absolute golden age, the perfect era of buildings, and that is the 1980s and early 90s. But despite these buildings not being that old, a lot of them have already been pulled down. Let's take a look at this building in Gillingham, Chatham. This building was a very well built building, and it's a classic example of an 80s building. It looks very 80s, and when it was pulled down, you could then see the quality. This building is made of 2 layers of brick, then a layer of concrete, then another 2 layers of brick, and that formed the outer walls. Would you ever get a building built like that in the modern day? No, you wouldn't. This was crazily well built. But not only that, this building was also a concrete frame building. So the outer brick and concrete walls are supporting the building and the building's concrete frame was supporting it. That is very well built. In the modern day, any bricks on the outside you see are just decorative. You would never get a building both supportive bricks and concrete on the outer walls and a concrete frame on the inside at the same time. This building was crazy over-engineered. Didn't stop him pulling it down though, did it? And what's replaced it? Bog standard, cheap, nasty, ugly modern housing. Why pull down an over-engineered building to replace it with crap? So now let's leave Chatham Gillingham and go to the building in this video, which is the ICC in Birmingham. Let's start off by taking a look at the interior. And this is why I feel this is the golden age of buildings. This was the era when buildings were still over-engineered and built brilliantly. The era of proper engineering, buildings were well built. And it was after this point that buildings got significantly cheaper. But in the 1980s, you also have the futuristic modern era of buildings with big glass fronts, loads of glass everywhere, very modern lifts, very advanced for a time, and a big era of progress for the time where buildings suddenly went from looking quite old-fashioned to looking incredibly modern. And the 80s is that golden blend of the two, well built and modern. And in no other era of history do you get the two. In the modern day you get modern looking buildings, but buildings are not built to the same quality as they were anymore. Let's take a look around the ICC. And one thing which is absolutely classic of the 80s, and by the way, this building opened in 1991, so it's early 90s but it's still built to that 80s style. And one thing that really shows up how nice buildings were in the 80s is these big, spectacular atriums. They look really nice. And the thing is, would a modern day building built in the 2020s look as good as this? Well, there are some really nice buildings in the modern day, as big skyscrapers like Landmark Pinnacle, but for a building that's literally just a conference centre, would they put in this much effort? Well, they might do if it's a very posh one, but probably not quite to this scale. With the big atriums, with the bridges going across, those bridges look amazing. That looks very futuristic, high level walkways linking together different parts of the building. It is modern, except not quite modern to what modern day is, because architecture designs have moved on since then. But I still think this 80s design looks incredibly modern, and in some cases more modern than the present day. For an atrium style building like this, I think the 80s was the golden era for this sort of thing. Then, as well as that, you also get the classic 80s features alongside the really posh atrium, such as these ball lights that you've got going along the stairs. Those look so 80s and they look very nice. Why can't modern day buildings be built like this? Let's now take a look at the lifts. And let's start off with the glass lift in the atrium. Technology wise, this lift's actually the least interesting out of the lifts in the building, because this one is hydraulic. This one has sadly been modernised, although it's still got some original Schindler features, because all the lifts in this building were originally Schindler's. So there's something about Schindler and epic 80s atriums that just go together. Like an 80s atrium without a Schindler, it's not a proper 80s atrium, because Schindler is the #1 lift of the 1980s. They built them good. So we go inside this lift. Looking up at the ceiling, you've got the classic Schindler uplights going round the corners of the cab of the lift. That is very Schindler looking and very nice. Sadly though, the logic and buttons have been changed. Let's now ride the lift.
Please mind the door. Doors closing. Going down. Second floor.
Mod by Schindler, both highly rather than iconic. How dare they?
Doors opening.
Now we go along to the Symphony Hall part of the building. This part of the building also looks very 80s and 90s looking, especially that nice curving design to it. If it was built in a modern day, it would not look that nice. It just wouldn't. It's got such a nice 80s feel to this. And along to the lifts, which are the classic, the Schindler Iconic V, with perfect intelligent levelling with intelligent overrun and pre-doors. The best you can get. No modern day lift will come into land at a floor as fast as these things do. Although Schindler Iconic MXGC, which is a modern day version of this, is still almost as good, the Schindler Iconic V still beats it. It is the best lift. No replacement of this lift could improve it. If I ever did a replacement to these lifts in the future, it would be a downgrade. Level 5A. Accelerating full speed. Really good this, and the decel great. It's like jolt on decel. Decel with a bit of jolt and pre-door. Nice and quick. And now we go along to the lifts to the conference rooms, where there's two Schindler Iconic V lifts. These lifts, just like the others, are also absolutely perfect, apart from a button replacement. Let's ride them.
Level 6.
Level 4.
Doors
A.
Doors closing. Doors opening. Level 4A.
Let's surf them. And now I go to a little tucked away lift. I didn't actually know this lift existed till I looked around the building. This is another Schindler Mechanic V lift. This lift serves the left hand side of the building and goes between a couple of different floors to the other lifts. Let's ride it. This is quick. Speeding up. Reach 1.6 metre a second. That is good acceleration, and the decel is really quick. Decel arrived.